Good evening and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Finance for the town of Simsbury for October 19th. I'll call the meeting to order and let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We're delighted to have Francine with us this evening. Amy, did you want to introduce or tee this up? That'd be great.
Yep. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up what Francine had prepared. So these are the forecasts that I had sent over to everyone. Just to give you a little bit of brief background and overview of how these came to be, several weeks ago, Francine, myself, and the planning director, Mike Glidden, had all met to go through any forecasted and upcoming projects that he was aware of that would impact the grant list going forward. So he is actually presenting to the EDC in the upcoming weeks. So he was able to share with us a draft of his presentation on what we can see coming down the line. So as you typically see in prior years, we have, the adjustments, the abatements, what we expect for real estate, personal property, motor vehicle, and then that leads us to our total net grant list. And then in addition to that, Francine put together a little chart here that shows the fiscal year 22-23 new development projections. So each project is listed here and whether it's going to impact real estate or personal property. And then down here, she broke out the assessments for abatements. Currently, we have 2 abatements, one for EBAD and then the other for Ensign House. And these are the tax dollars associated with those abatements. And then going in the out years, since we don't know what the impact will be, she just provided the percentage of the abatement for each. And then lastly, down here, we have our losses in revenue, so to speak, or other abatements where we either receive grant money or we don't receive anything. So we have our fire and ambulance personnel that are available or that are allowed to get abatements for their taxes. We have the elderly and totally disabled homeowner program. And then we also have the local veterans program as well. So this is just kind of a high level overview. Like you said, Francine, our assessor is on the line to go through any questions that you have, or if you want her to take you through how she does her projections, whatever you need, she's here to answer.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start. I just make sure that it's clear that the amount of the abatement assessment abatement is the reduction in the assessed value at which the mill rate is applied. Correct? It's not. We're not abating $3.7 million worth of taxes. Only the amount that gets charged the taxes. Correct?
That's correct. It is the assessment and not the tax dollars.
Oh, sorry. I think I said the opposite.
That's all right. I just wanted to be sure that we all were clear on that. Francine, can you help me understand which some of these projects, especially the apartment buildings and the like, how do we determine what the assessed value is? And is that is a real estate a depreciating asset? Or is it like a home that gets revalued on a periodic basis based on its fair value or a cap cost or the like?
All right. Yes, they're valued during our revaluation. Same thing throughout the town every 5 years. Mm-hmm. In the new construction, so it's based on market. Definitely the income approach is used for the rental properties, for the apartments, which we request income reports, income and expense reports from these property owners every year. And that's what we use to estimate the value. And of course, we take a look at the market approach also. But the income base is used. In the new construction, I just want to clarify the new builds, the new apartments that are currently being built. We use the cost approach because we don't have an income approach for those. So until they're completed, the income approach is being used.
The cost approach, you mean?
The cost approach. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Good. So just following on that line, so the development that's being done at Andy's Plaza should increase that property, but when will we see an impact from that? Only when that property is leased?
We'll see an impact most likely next year on that one, because yes, it's being remodeled and changes are being done. Most of it has been vacant for several years. We should see an adjustment on that for next year. We'll see personal property sooner, but we'll probably see some personal property, a portion of it for this year. But that's not projected in here since it's not going to be, that much. I did not include that in my projection here in this forecast.
Okay, and if you look at the, let's take the McLean independent living expansion at $7.5 million. What's the total scope of that project? I thought it was several.
That's based on approximately 50% of it being completed at this point in time. So I'm only adding about 50% of the cost as an estimate. This is still estimated at this point in time.
So this is this box that's on your chart.
Yes.
Is the 22-23 new development projection, and that shows up above where? Yeah, in the this is for the 22-20. Is it in the 22?
It's going to be, yes, in the 22-23. Because we're working currently on the 21 grant list, which is October 1st of 21. So your fiscal year 22-23.
So these increases are in there, and then you
yes.
expect further increases as that.
So we're still working on the grant list. So yeah. Okay.
All right.
But McLean is going to be approximately 50% complete. Yeah. So that's an.
And so what's the rationale for your projections showing sort of flat line and then a slight decrease in the value of real estate, 4, 5, 6 years from now?
So you're talking about 23, 24?
Well, no, I'm looking out to 25, 26, where we go from 2 billion 4 to 2 billion 350 and then flat.
All right. Well, I'm showing about 50 million in a reduction. I'm estimating based on the revaluation that's going to be coming up, court cases, adjustments on that, not knowing. Again, it's a forecast, and personal property, and includes motor vehicle also, but the majority of it is real estate. Again, trying to forecast.
So this is a challenge. Yeah. Let me back up and just say that we really appreciate you, coming tonight and doing this work in advance of this. I think this is one of the most challenging things for all three of the boards that help create our budgets. We do, I think, a very good job looking out 12 to 24 months with line of sight. But as we know, there are longer range plans that the town has for both Board of Education buildings and town building improvements that need to be put into a long-term capital CIP plan. And we need to know, we have to be as good as we can be today to trying to fit those projects into a long-term budget, because otherwise they just keep getting kicked out. So, in my mind, we're entering a period of, increased inflation and, personal property and some growth that we've experienced over time. So we need to do as good a job as we can forecasting the out years, not a conservative job, but as good a job as we can going forward, because it will impact starting on, keeping larger dollar projects in the capital improvement plan moving forward in the way we want them to, and have our ability to be able to try to fit the tax and tax revenues we have with the debt service that is going to be a big part of these forward project plans. So
it's very difficult, and it's very difficult trying to get all this and do the best that we can with the staffing that we currently have. So again, this is a forecast, and based on what I currently know, based on what we can do at this point in time, this is my forecast. It's very difficult to project ahead of time.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask, taking that into account, it is very difficult and it's just a forecast. Is this a consensus? I assume we draw on external resources to do things like that, but are there external authorities who are projecting a net decline in real estate value for 3 years? I mean, you're being cautious here, but I do realize that's fairly dramatic, and it has significant impacts. Is that based on, is there a bank or an outside group which is really forecasting that kind of a fairly dramatic decline, or is that just in-house?
No, that's just in-house. Again, so our next revaluation is for next year, right? 22, October 22. So your 24, your 23-24 fiscal year. So with the upcoming development, I have for 24-25 an increase based on the development, but then a decrease again, as I said previously, estimating that, trying to predict that there might be a possibility of court cases, some adjustments. Perhaps that should be reflected more in the tax appeals up above, more so than my projection down below. But in looking at all this, the fiscal year 24-25 at 2.4, and then the following year at 2.35, typically, I mean, it takes a few years to get cases settled. And yes, I'm being very cautious. So,
just a couple of things. When we did the last revaluation, what was the tax appeal adjustment actual that came from that revaluation?
I would have to go back and pull that out. We're still making adjustments on those. Some of them have been spread out over a few years, so they weren't as drastic. There's a couple of them specifically. So for the total from the actual reval year and the final outcome court cases, I'd have to go back and pull that information.
So if you look, so let me understand this spreadsheet. So when you look at, let's look at 23-24, the $5 million adjustment, the first line item, that's an increase of $5 million from the previous year from new projects. Is that correct?
that's projected for that year.
Right. Okay. And another $5 million from other real estate adjustments. What is that?
That would be other, from development, I in there include your big development. The other real estate would be, building permits, single residences. That's the way I'm reflecting it.
Okay.
Okay.
And so then the abatements approved, is that?
Those are the two that we currently have. So they're being adjusted every year.
Okay.
So those will be, yes.
And is that because the underlying real estate or personal property is depreciating, that it would go down slightly?
You're looking at this personal property adjustments here?
No, I'm looking at the 3.5 million down from 3,687,000 down to 3 million.
Those are the abatements. Yeah, those are the abatements for.
Yeah, why did they go down? Did they go down because
that's the approved fixed assessment adjustment.
Those were phased out.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay. All right. And then personal property adjustments, what is that? That's increases in equipment and
based on some of the developments that would have personal property.
Okay, so now I get what you're saying. So between the 22-23 year and the 23-24 year, in the next one, the tax appeal adjustments, you think there could be another $3 million of successful appeals against the appraised value or assessed value of the property, right?
This total adjustment here of 3.5 million?
No, that number right there that Amy just highlighted, it's $3 million higher in the 23-24 year than in the previous year. So you think that?
Okay. Yes. Total appeal adjustments. Those would be those. That's just your appeal adjustments. That would include real estate and personal property. Any appeals. Okay.
All right. I'm going to make just a couple more comments, and then I'm going to ask for anybody else who has questions specific. I don't mean to hog the light here. And Francine, again, we appreciate the work that you do on our behalf. But I will note just generally for all of the boards and for the Board of Finance in particular that, our job is to project and make budgets that are balanced over time. And being conservative is not our goal. Mm-hmm. Being accurate is our goal. Because if we are underestimating the grand list growth, we are going to overtax the taxpayers or defer projects that we could otherwise have hoped that we would be able to finance.
I totally understand that.
Okay.
And that's why I mentioned earlier, and I take this opportunity to let you know that we are doing the best that we can in this office, knowing that we are currently understaffed for what's going on in this town.
So as a question for Amy, maybe Lisa and others that have been around longer, have we ever engaged an outside consultant to help us forecast the future forecast, as Art had asked earlier? And that's not a reflection on your work, Francine. It's a reflection on getting best practices from town to town. Yep. And I mean, in the business I'm in, we always go out to third parties to validate, support, help, give us an overall perspective.
So not that I'm aware, I don't know about Lisa's experience. I know she started talking, but I couldn't hear her, so I'm not sure if she's on mute.
Can you hear me now?
You have to get as close as you can.
Just barely, Lisa.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Better. Yeah.
Kind of scary picture. So we did talk about fiscal impact analysis and how we could get better projections as to whether a property is worth, and that would help us forecast. Rob, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think it makes good sense this year to put that in the budget so we can get some accurate numbers. I fully support that suggestion.
So this is a very, very, very large driver of our long-term process. And you'll see how it segues into the other things we're going to talk about tonight. But being able to have a forward view that we have relatively high confidence in is a really important part of the work that we do. It's why the Board of Finance has longer terms and overlapping terms, because we really need to make short-term decisions with long-term impact. And so
may I suggest, as I mentioned, there's the upcoming revaluation. So of course, that we won't have those final, and there's definitely an increase in the valuation of most real estate at this point, residential that is. So we won't get that final outcome until January of 23 is when we'll get a pretty good finalization of what our valuation is. At that point, if you would like a better projection of the big development that's going on, I would suggest possibly having someone take a look at those and giving you the outcome on those big developments.
Is there a line item in? Is there a line item in here for the adjustment from the revaluation?
Yes, I put that into consideration.
And where does that show in the top line? Or
right here. I included it, the percentage between the 2.24 and 2.285.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with development now. I'm just going by the increase in valuation based on the market, the current market.
So that's $45 million of increased
and overall
home valuation. All right. Anybody else have some questions about? Yeah, Lisa.
Francine, first of all, thank you for your work on this. We know it's a hard job and we appreciate all you're doing. I did have a couple of questions. The first thing that sort of stuck out to me was McLean's. We're only anticipating 15 million total development value. That may surprise people in terms of taxes. Can you speak to that? Because I know they're putting in more money than 14 million. Why are we only taxing 14 million, 7.5 this year and 7.5 next?
And Lisa, I couldn't quite hear the beginning of your statement. So which project are you referring to?
The McLean's?
Oh, McLean's.
Yes.
All right. That's my current forecast. Again, this is my forecast. I'm still working on the 21 grand list. Currently, that's my forecast for the 21, adding 7.5 million in assessment.
What is the total value of their investment? Like if they were to sell it tomorrow, do we know that?
There's no idea. And is any of that because of its ownership structure? Is any of that not taxed because of its 501c3 or foundation?
No, based on my current knowledge, it is taxable. It is independent living. Do I have all the information I need? No, I do not. So this is based on what I currently know and the fact that, yes, I believe that the entire project is taxable.
Have you called David Bordenaro at McLean's?
Have I? No.
What the
not.
amount of money is being spent on the construction?
Well, the permit itself is roughly about 23 million.
So why would we only anticipate a total tax of 15 million?
Well, this is an assessment.
Assessed tax of 15 million.
Okay.
Okay.
The 23 million would be based on possibly a market, the cost. So cost and market value don't always correlate.
And do we have an option whether to tax on cost or market value, or are we obligated to tax on one or the other?
As I previously stated, with the newer development and specifically leased income producing properties, we I typically use cost approach when it's under construction, because I don't have the data for doing an income approach. And you wouldn't be able to, I would not do an income approach on a property that's not even deriving any income.
So that implies some discretion. So I'm trying to get at how you exercise that discretion. When do you go with cost versus income, and what are the criteria that are used and the standards we use to decide? Because I would think one of them would be higher and we would get more tax revenue, and one would be lower and we'd get less tax revenue. So how is that determination made? I'm not saying it as an accusation. I just don't understand the evaluation.
Yeah. Well, again, I can't use the income approach on a property that I have no data on. We do not, while it's under construction, cost approach is most widely used for prorating purposes also. Once the property is completed, they receive their certificate of occupancy. The final valuation will then be prorated on, will be added on. The following year, it will be valued as it could be as the income approach.
So I guess that's what I'm
we use different approaches, again, in valuing. Yes, we use market value, income approach, cost approach. For a property that's under construction, cost approach is the way to go.
And why is that? Is that what the law says? Is that a best practice?
There's no income coming off the property, Lisa.
I understand why, but why do you make the shift? Is that required?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You got cut off.
I was just saying, I do understand why you don't use the one during construction, but why you shift to the other one afterwards. This is like McLean's is this, very expensive. I think it's over 50 million. So
all three approaches will be reviewed, and the best one for the property, once it's finalized, will then be used to final.
Perfect. So how do you determine which one is the best?
That's when you review the entire package and figure that out. All the information, I will have to gather all that information.
And when you say the best, because it's most accurate, is that how you do it?
I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm sorry, Lisa.
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, I can talk to you offline. I guess I'm not understanding how you pick. That's all I was looking for, like what criteria you look at.
Francine, as an example, how do we value the anthology facility on Hot Meadow Street, and what's its assessed value?
Yep. That is based on an income approach based on other similar properties that we have generated. And that is, we have three different incomes depending on because we have independent living there, assisted living, and we have a memory care. So we have a breakdown per bed unit, per apartment of what the market is for that type of property, and that's what's used to value that property. I don't know if I explained that properly.
Yeah, well, I guess a follow-up on that. I'm not fully understanding, but I know you're very good at what you do.
I'm better at what I do than explaining myself.
That's okay.
And you could probably see that right now.
Crowd, so I do appreciate that. But when you talk about income expense, you mentioned that you rely on income expense reports. Do we independently verify those reports? Are those?
Oh, yes. We request those every year.
But how are they independently evaluated? Is that certified by an auditor or?
No.
So it's based on their representations to us?
Yes,
And do we ever go
They-
back and check and just make
we
sure?
can. Yes, the assessor has the authority to audit, as they do have the authority to audit personal property declarations. We have the authority to audit income and expense reports. It has been done in the past. So they are required to provide all information necessary that's requested on there, and sign an affidavit of the information that they are providing is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. So
And when we go through reval, do the
we use that.
reevaluators look at that?
Yes, that information is provided along to our revaluation company that they will use, verify, and we do compare it with other similar properties. Is the expense that is being provided on there comparable to other similar properties? Is the expenses a lot higher than a similar property and it's way off? What about the cap rate? I mean, we take a look at all that. We compare it all, and go off, and we'll use what's the current rent, what's the contract rent, and again, all that data is looked into, verified, and that's what we use during our evaluation. So again, the costs that I'm using right now are all costs based on our market from 2017. All right. So I can't value McLean's Independent, this new addition based on current market value because we're not there yet. We're still using 2017's market from that evaluation. And that's the data that I need to stick with at this point in time.
So they could theoretically be hit with a huge tax bill.
Well, come the revaluation, we will review all that. And that's when the adjustments will be done based on our current market at that time.
So we don't adjust throughout the years. Like,
no.
When you do like if I renovated my kitchen though, I would get an adjustment before the 5-year reval, right?
Oh, yes, definitely based on the changes that you're doing to your property. But again, if you're putting an addition on, that per square foot addition cost that I'm going to add is going to be based on our market value that we have from our 17 revaluation. It's not going to be based on a per square footage cost of today, where you see that the lumber cost has skyrocketed. Will those properties get a big increase during the revaluation? Most likely. They will see a bigger increase than residences that have had no additions or big changes done.
So there's 2 hits to them. One, during the time that it's built, and if it's built in mid-reval, and then the second time, once the reval comes up, you might get a second hit for what you had done to reflect.
Yes.
it. Okay.
Well, because then that's when we make the adjustments. That's when we re-equalize the town-wide valuations based on current market.
I appreciate this. Francine, I'll reiterate. It sounds a little bit like an interrogation. We don't mean it to be. We're trying to get smarter about how all of this works because we're going to have to, we use these things, all of the boards do in trying to formulate policy and budgets going forward. So if it sounds like we're interrogating you, we don't mean that. It's because we're ignorant of what is actually all the hard work you do and are trying to understand it better.
And there's a lot of development, and that all that development doesn't just end there once it's completed. You then have to add, how much more is added to that. The motor vehicle grant list is most likely going to increase because you're going to have more individuals. Your population is going to go up. So, it just keeps going.
I just have one final sort of broad question. First of all, to echo what Rob said, I think that's exactly right. We really appreciate you coming and explaining to us, and it's very hard concepts for us, I imagine for the public as well. So we appreciate your doing this. One question I had is with the apartments, do those buildings depreciate over time generally, or because of the
No,
rent goes up?
no, your personal
No.
property will depreciate. The real estate is valued based on the market and will get adjusted based on the market.
Even though it's based on the income of?
Well, I say market, the market, the income approach, or, market, it'll be adjusted every revaluation. It won't depreciate like the personal property would depreciate.
Yeah, it's not like the solar fields or personal property. If the rent load of a building goes up, then the appraised or the assessed value should go up at the reval.
Yep.
If rents go down, the value will go down, but not just because the building's another 10 years older.
Exactly.
Okay, that's
Glad I got that right. All
yeah,
right.
very good. Very
Again, my apologies for my expressing,
Well, we're fine.
Okay.
Derek or Kevin, Art, Linda, other questions for Francis?
No questions, Rob, just 30,000 foot view here. I understand that people are all feeling cost pressures today. Nobody knows if this inflation is transitory or not. I would say that valuations are extremely high across the board and borrowing costs are extremely low. Treasury rates are starting to tick up a little bit, but I think we're in a period where there's longer, lower rates for longer. We can't afford to pay our national debt if interest rates continue to rise. So I think that, any number of things could happen in years 4, 5, and 6 out. So I appreciate Francine's thoughtful look at how the numbers are coming out here, although maybe not ideal, and maybe could be adjusted around the edges. I think it's probably the best that anybody could do at this point. So I appreciate that. I really don't have any other questions on this, Rob. I think maybe I'd be more supportive of just more of a flattening as opposed to a decrease. I think the tax appeal adjustment line item really stands apart from any other line item as the biggest one where you're seeing 300% increases, kind of year over year for 3 years and then flat. Given what we know in past years and the actuals here and projected next year, I think over doubling that number on a projection, unless there's some known reason, would be probably something I'd want to know a little bit more about. But other than that, I'm all set.
Rob, I associate myself with these comments made and the difficulty of this. I just note that if real estate does go down for 3 years, and if the motor vehicle grand list is actually smaller, notably in 6 years than it is today, if numbers hold out, that has very serious implications for spending levels, for projected salary increases, for expenditures by the town, because we will not have the revenue at the current paces to pay them. So this may be right, but if it does, it's a fairly dire forecast for town spending in the future. And I think we need to recognize that at this point.
Noted.
Well, if I may add, I will have a better forecast come December, towards the end of December, beginning of January.
Francine, what
Right.
kind of things will change between now and the end of December? Do you get more information? How does it
Oh,
change?
yes, there's a lot more to be added in here. We're still working on a lot. There's a lot of permits out there, a lot of construction that I still need to add into. So again, this is a quick forecast based on my current data, but still need to put all this data in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Francine? Appreciate it very much. Great. Moving on then, we will move to item number 4, which is the year-end financial results. Amy?
Yeah, just let me share my screen. So starting off with our revenues, we just go all the way to the bottom here. Where's my things never catch up? So this was our budget, 102 million in revenues. We landed at 104 million in revenues. And so we had excess revenues at the end of the year of about 1.8 million. So some of the highlights associated with that, just starting with the top, we have our tax department, which exceeded budget estimates by 509,000. This is something that you hear every single year and you plan for during the budget cycle. We do our tax collection rate at 98.5%. We know that we typically collect more than that. And so here's your surplus associated with that was planned for during budget. Moving down to the building department, one item of note here was our building permit fees. They were budgeted at 450,000 and they actually came in at almost $1.3 million. So that's the main variance in the surplus there. Down to the finance department, the only department that's bringing us down. This decrease mainly relates to our investment income, which I've said for 3 quarters now.
You said, Amy, come on.
I know, damn market, everything else is good. So anyways, $400,000 was budgeted for our investment income. We only made about $60,000. Luckily, some of that was offset by some COVID grants for a little over $200,000 that we received during the year. And then the variance compared to prior year, we did a debt issuance that resulted in a bond premium that did not recur in the current year. Moving down to the town clerk's office, $308,000 in surplus. This is mainly related to our conveyance and our recording fees. As you heard me say, over the last few quarters, there is a housing boom, and especially one in Simsbury that a lot of other communities aren't seeing. And then the last item that was a significant variance that I wanted to note was down here under the Board of Education. We received excess ECS funding in the current year that was not in the original state proposed budget that we had based our projections on. So then that leads to your overall surplus of about 1.8 million. Moving on to expenditures. So you can see here as we go through, there's a lot of variances here, tons of under budgeted accounts. There's one over budget here that's a little significant. The police department has a major one due to personnel vacancies. But honestly, the majority of the overs and unders here are related to personnel vacancies. I think I noted in the cover memo was around $800,000 or so that was related to personnel vacancies. So there was a few things here. Personnel vacancies. We also had unsettled union contracts for our CSEA union. We were closed for a portion of the year with the library, the senior center, so that led to some savings. And then the one line here related to legal under the general government where we exceeded budget for 21,000. This was related to our labor negotiations as we are starting to finalize the union contracts. So in the end, we had budgeted about 104 million in expenditures. We landed at 103 million, and therefore we came in under budget of about $1 million. Moving on to the Simsbury Farms Fund. This was a good year for them. So you can see here, and again, just reiterating what I've said in previous quarterly updates, your variances to actual here. We were definitely under budget. We came in lower than prior years, all related to COVID and canceling of activities, events that couldn't happen, things that didn't take place, things of that nature. So that's the majority for our recreation programs as well as our farms complex programs. And then you can see here that our golf course had a very good year, coming in above budget, and the variance compared to the prior year in excess of those final results as well. And then moving down to our expenditures, you can see the golf course came in slightly above budget. And in comparison to the prior year, that increase is actually just related to some equipment purchases. And then since we didn't have as many programs or not as many activities going, there was savings in those line items on the expenditure side, and then pretty much a break even on the farms administration. So at the end of the year, due to that golf kind of helping us out, we had a surplus of about $140,000. On to the health insurance fund. So here we landed with a surplus of about $680,000. And then we landed with a fund balance of about $4.4 million. So we take our fund balance plus our IBNR liability. This gives us our total reserve calculation of about $5.3 million. And currently this is about 36% of expected claims. And as I say every quarter, our target is 20 to 25%. So this fund is in very good shape going into the budget season. You'll see here that we did really well in our claims for our expenditures. We budgeted about 14 million, came in about 13 million. So I'm sure some of that is related to COVID and people continuing to push off procedures and not going to the doctors as often. But we're able to realize that in the current year. And then up here, I just wanted to point this out because it looks a little odd compared to how we budgeted. We did not budget off $760,000. This is the line item that is hit when we adjust our IBNR. So last year, you'll see our IBNR is about $649,000. Our health insurance consultants gave us our new IBNR liability of the $932,000. So it is offset from the premiums. So we did not under budget for that line item. I just wanted to make that.
Yeah, IDNR. Sorry.
This is the pop quiz, Arthur.
Yeah.
I have to look it up every time.
Incurred but not reported.
Not reported.
Yes, you got it. Linda gets an A.
I worked in the insurance industry.
So that's it as far as the town financials go. I don't know if you have any questions on any of the other funds. If not, I'll just move on to the Board of Education quick, and then we can get into transfer.
So can I just real quickly back on the insurance, the health insurance fund? So the fact that we had a positive variance overall, that variance went into the specific fund reserve, correct?
Yes.
That's not part of the transfers that we're going to look at into the general.
Oh, correct. Right.
Okay. That's what I said better. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah. Were there questions on the other specific funds and trusts? I think pretty much normal ins and outs. Lisa.
I guess mine is more sort of a general comment. We had almost 2 million in excess revenues and almost $1 million in savings. So that's about a $3 million variance that, were that in tax relief, could have been significant for a lot of our taxpayers. And I think it goes back to Rob's other comment on projecting grand lists, how challenging it is, but also how important it is to try and get not necessarily conservative numbers, but accurate numbers, and to think about what we can do going forward to maybe get closer to accuracy. I know we can't. We always do some planned cushioning, and that's with our tax collection assumption rate is a planned tax cushion that we do every year openly and transparently. But these things were unanticipated, and partly due to the pandemic, or Amy did a nice job of explaining some of why that happened. But I'm just wondering what we can do to get more accurate. And I think Rob hit the nail on the head with his suggestion of perhaps bringing in a consultant to help us do some long-term forecasting. I know Amy puts in hours of this, but boy, that takes up a lot of your time, and it might be helpful to have someone help you do that so that it doesn't take up quite so much of your time. And maybe we can see what's going in there. I know Linda had a good suggestion that she brought up a few times about budgeting vacancies and how we could do that. And so there may be other things we can do to try and get accuracy. We don't expect perfection, but maybe a little bit closer to.
Right. Any business I've ever worked in never budgets based on an expectation that 100% of the positions will be filled for 100% of the time.
On day one, right.
Right. And we have talked about this in past years and been told that it's too difficult to do, but I think we have to figure out how to do that. And because $800,000 in unfilled positions, maybe that's an unusual thing for this year, but let's look back over multiple years and either take an average or take the lowest or do something to recognize that in no year were we at 100% occupancy.
Or we don't hire at the same salary. We generally hire at a lower salary.
At a lower
so we're
salary.
Budgeting. So there are some things we can do to make progress to a more accurate projection. And, and we may need help. We understand the limitations of staff and resources. So our board, I think I'm hearing a consensus is that we're certainly open to getting you the resources you need, because we believe strongly in the importance of good projections and good numbers, because that goes to the heart of policy and taxation. And so that's a spend to save in my mind.
Yeah. So I'll say the same thing I said earlier, a slightly different way. If this was a operating or profit business, we would take the surplus in revenue and the savings and expenses, and we reward our shareholders and our employees for an excellent job. But that's not the enterprise we have. I look at these results, and while admirable in both coming in under budget on expenses and greater in revenues, that we tax the people for this, the taxpayers for those expenses. And, now we're going to put some of it back into the general fund or the capital fund. And so our job is to try to get a little bit better. And I'm with Linda on this particular point. I think we need, we could absolutely go back in time and figure out what percentage vacancy, if you will, or delayed hiring we would have actual versus what we forecast, and have that be part of our budgeting going forward. It probably, easily 20-year track record of doing that. If we, those, just one example that we, I think we need transparency. We're transparent about the discussions we have relative to the tax collection rate, for instance, that where we build in a collection rate of 98.5%, and in reality, we've almost uniformly collected 99.5%. That's about $500,000, about $500,000 on an annual basis. Maybe it's only 0.5%, but in any event, if at every place we're building in a surplus or a cushion, we can be wrong by having too much cushion at the end of the year. It's, and although it's a first class problem, it's still a problem. And so we just need to be better about it. It's not, that's what we're trying to do. So.
We're happy to give you the resources to help you get better at it.
Yeah.
We understand it's a common goal, not any one person's responsibility and just the amount of time you have. But Rob's right. What we don't want to have is we have a planned cushion with the tax collection rate. We don't need cushions upon cushions upon cushions, especially when we've got our general reserves at almost 16%.
Okay. Any other discussion or questions relative to the review? Amy, as always, we don't say this often enough, but I thought your summary was extremely helpful in getting me to not have to spend 2.5 hours on each of the pages. And, because you gave us a good summary of where the big dollars were and why, and that's really important. That helps us do our job. So good job on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the Board of Education.
Yeah.
So I won't go through the revenues. There's nothing that's changed since the last time that was reported out. So I'll just come down here to the expenditures and kind of start down here by the narrative. So one of the things that I want you to keep in mind while we're going through this is that there was a spending freeze that was put in place around, I think, a little after the January timeframe. And these numbers could have looked a lot worse without that spending freeze. And of course, the grants didn't hurt either. So under the general control, the budgetary surplus of about $80,000. So as you know, there was a couple retirements during the year and a restructure with the school business manager and the assistant superintendent leaving. So we had a slight surplus there. Instruction, this deficit, I feel like is kind of misleading. It's showing a deficit of about $55,000, but like I said, without the spending freeze and the grants, this deficit would have looked more like about like $480,000. So some good news there. Moving on to health services, just a small surplus for some overtime and substitutes that weren't needed during the year. Transportation, we had a decrease in our athletics transportation, obviously due to COVID, and then all of the summer programs were canceled last year as well due to COVID. On the operation of plant, we had a deficiency of $77,000. As you may recall, we hired 3 custodians last year to do additional COVID cleaning. We had plexiglass, sanitizing supplies, things of that nature. But then on the opposite end, we had a budgetary surplus under the maintenance of our facilities of about $150,000. Schools were hybrid. They weren't being used to their full capacity. There was more of a focus on the cleaning rather than maintenance during the year, things of that nature. Under the insurance and pension, we had a budgetary deficit here. We had a few additional individuals that took on our health insurance. We had additional overtime for additional Social Security costs. I just mentioned we hired the 3 custodians. We had also hired 5 distance learning teachers when we were in a hybrid remote teaching model. So there was the increase there. Food services, I'm going to skip over for a minute because there's more to this one than just an under and an over. Student body activities, community services. Again, there was a surplus due to a cancellation of activities related to COVID. And then a deficiency here under equipment of about $35,000 in order to accommodate the remote and hybrid learning situations. Like I said, this could have been a lot worse without some of the grants that we received and without the spending freeze. And then down here, we got a little bit of unexpected good news for our outer district. If you recall back in, I think it was around April that I had presented, we were thinking that we were going to have a $200,000 loss associated with our outer district and our special education. However, good news, bad news, we had some additional students that qualified for excess cost reimbursement. And then the state actually increased our rate of reimbursement for excess costs during the year from 70.89% to 80.31%. So that gave us an extra over $200,000 in this line item. So that was some good news there. Moving on to the Cafeteria Fund, which I wanted to talk about separately. So during the year, as you know, we had a free program for all food and lunch programs during the year. That was, I don't believe it was mandated this year, but I'm pretty sure every single district took advantage of it with the exception of maybe 1 or 2. Meals were offered at no cost to students. So we basically lost our stream of revenue within that fund. So because of that, we ended with a operating loss of about $300,000 in that fund. We were able to cover about $100,000 from our spending freeze grant surplus out of the general fund. And then we had about $60,000 left in our fund balance in the cafeteria fund. So this leaves us with a loss of about $200,000. We received notification probably, I want to say a couple months ago now, where the State Department of Education had reimbursed us for meals during COVID from the March 2020 to June of 2020. And there is a rumor that there is a second allocation coming. So I'm hesitant to pull that money from non-lapsing if we don't have to for a couple of reasons. If the second allocation is coming at the same rate as the first allocation, we'll be in good shape. And then also, as we know, during COVID, there were some grants that came down the line where had we budgeted for it, we wouldn't have qualified for it. So I'd like to hold on to that loss a little bit longer to see if any additional grant money is coming. And then if no additional grant money is coming, this year we also hired a new fabulous food services director, tons of experience, tons of great ideas. She already got us into a new program that's going to get our reimbursement rate higher than our current program. And I'd really like to see what she can do during the year and reevaluate at the end of the year to see if we need any of that non-lapsing to offset any of that loss. So that's kind of my plan going forward. Just wanted to put it out there, see if there's any questions on the cafeteria fund, if there's any questions on the BOE budget in general.
Amy, this is Linda. I don't have any problem with your plan going forward, but I am curious about this turn of events where we provided free food to every single kid, regardless of how wealthy a family they came from. I only just heard about this a week ago from a constituent and teacher who was outraged that their tax dollars were being used to provide free food to kids from wealthy families. And I didn't know anything about it and couldn't reply, but can you give us a little background about how did this come about?
So actually at the beginning of the year, we didn't offer the free program to everyone.
Was it a federal mandate or something, or?
It's not a mandate, it was an option. And I think we received some pressure from surrounding communities because, like I said, every single district took advantage of it with the exception of, I think, 2 smaller districts that didn't have the capacity. And even with that, we still hadn't offered it at the beginning of the school year. And then we actually received, or I shouldn't say we, Matt, Sue Lemke, and our food services director had received a lot of pressure, emails. People came to meetings to speak about it. They wanted the program. They didn't feel like it was fair for students to go without. And I think they reversed their decision and they decided to go along with the majority and offer the free program.
And Linda, I think also there's no, I had asked this question before of Amy. There's no requirement to prove that you live in Simsbury. Anybody could come into town and get a meal. So whether they were rich or poor or felt like they should get a meal or not, they didn't even have to live in Simsbury to get one.
Wow.
I think especially during the summer program as well. I think this one, the program for the fiscal year that we're talking about was during like remote and hybrid. But I believe before that, when they offered the free program, kind of like Derek said, it wasn't only for students, it was for families. So you didn't have to be a student in order to attain a free meal.
And so going forward, will we ever return to students paying for their lunch? Or is it...
That's a good question. For this current fiscal year that we're in, fiscal year 22, our new food services director did advise that we go free again, just because the new program that she put us in, we're getting a larger reimbursement than as if we were charging for the meals. We're still allowed to charge for the a la carte stuff. So if somebody wanted chips or cookies or things like that, people are still paying for that. But for the actual meals, our federal reimbursement is going to be higher than that of what we would charge somebody.
But there will be a budget impact going. I mean, obviously, there was a loss this year because of this. So this would increase the Board of Ed budget to change this policy. There's a budget implication here.
So I would guess yes. If we kept everything the same as prior years, I would definitely say yes. But like I said, the new food director, she has come in and she's doing like a complete revaluation of everything. Like she's well aware of the law. She's making changes in her program. She's making changes in her operations. So I'm kind of excited to see what she comes up with, honestly. The last district that she was at, she was in the black. She was not in the red like the majority of the other districts. So I'm hopeful there.
Okay.
I just wanted to add there, and I don't know if this was part of the consideration because I didn't watch the Board of Ed's decision on this, but it was reported nationally that a lot of schools are doing this for equity reasons, and that there was a lot of some children were being embarrassed when they couldn't afford and not eating, and so it was actually a very small price to take care of a devastating problem for some children. and to make them feel included and welcome. So it was a tiny price to pay for a huge benefit. So I assume that that was part of the calculation for the Board of Ed, although I don't know because I didn't watch their meeting on this.
Subsidized meals aren't anything new, and I'm sure that they're very cautious of, or sensitive to people kids especially not being able to afford meals. So I don't think that that's anything new, Lisa. I would imagine that they take the kids, emotions to heart when.
I'm just saying what was reported on the news.
Yeah,
So-
it's what I've been told. What I've been told that the way they do it in Simsbury is very sensitive to kids, so that it's not like they're paying with cash and other people are paying, that some with cash and other people with food stamps or something. Everybody pays with the same way, so it's sort of invisible who's subsidized and who isn't.
Right.
All right. So, but let me ask one question relative to how is the Board of Ed going to budget for this shortfall in the next budget cycle?
Rob, you have to wait for the next budget cycle.
All right.
I honestly have no idea. We haven't looked at it yet. It's a discussion that we're going to have with the new food services director and kind of see where we go from here.
All right.
Hey, Amy, I had a question. What were the FTEs 18-19? What was the student population 18-19?
The student population in 18-19?
And the FTEs?
Actually, I don't know offhand. I can send that to you offline afterwards.
Okay.
So student and FTE population for 18-19.
That's a Kevin Kroll question.
It should be in our last year's budget book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you knew it.
They always give us a chart with all that.
I've got it right here on my desk, Linda. Let me look it up.
Yeah, that's why I said it should be there. I don't have it handy either.
No, I keep it on the bedstead and I flip through, especially the older ones.
It's in my bookshelf, though.
Yeah. All right. It's just, Kevin,
I always ask the question, you always ask the lunch question, so I figured I had to chime in with the annual question.
I knew that was one Linda would not be able to not touch. All right, let's keep moving. Any other questions here? Because we do have the transfers, and that is an action item. So there's no action. All right. Amy?
I'm just gonna switch my screen. Okay, so just going through just our fund balance quick, and then we'll get to the transfers. This is where we started with our fund balance, about 18 million. And then as we just went through, we had about 1.8 excess revenues. There were some additional appropriations during the year. You might recall that at the last year's year-end appropriation or year-end transfers, we had proposed 2 million to go into the capital reserve. The Board of Finance wanted some more time to discuss the fund balance, capital reserve, and so those appropriations were made in this current fiscal year. So that's reduced by 2 million. And then we had our expenditures of 104 in our budget, actual 103. So there's our $1 million savings to a net increase to fund balance of $900,000, bringing us to about 18.9. So if we bring that down here to our chart, we have our non-spendable of 158,000, our assigned fund balance of 215, and then our unassigned fund balance, and that's the key number that we're looking for, of 18,622, which leaves us at 17.57%. So
which is above our guidance.
Right. So then if we go to here where we actually have the proposed transfers, I won't go through these yet. I'll give you a minute on those. If we look at the fund balance summary, we had the $900,000. And then the transfers from above, this gives us a net decrease to fund balance of $986,000 and brings our fund balance down to $17,100,000. And then I just put this as a placeholder here. We still have the non-spendable and the assigned, but with all of those transfers, give us a revised unassigned fund balance of about 15.7. And obviously the Board of Finance can change that percentage as they see fit, but that was just what we put in for a placeholder. So now going back up here to the transfers from the general fund. I don't know how you want to approach this, Rob. Do you want to do like a brief summary on them? Do you want to just go to questions? We have various department heads here to speak to their items. So whatever your preference is.
But just to recap, so these are the recommendations by the Board of Selectmen to the
Yes.
Board of Finance?
Yes, these were their last meeting, and these are what made it through the process.
Okay, so I guess I just a comment. Were there other items that were considered and not included?
Yes.
Okay, so we might want to talk about those, even though that it is the Board of Selectmen's both responsibility and prerogative to make those decisions. It would be helpful in us looking at these, understanding that. Does anybody have any specific questions about the items that were chosen and the amounts?
I just, looking at this chart that I'm seeing on the screen, one of the suggestions I had about this whole proposal is that when you read in the packet that I picked up, this would be page 24. The pages aren't numbered, but there's absolutely there's no delineation between these. So that, for example, you look here, you say a promise to Jordan, you see 2 lines and it's in a box. When you pick it up, it is one long paragraph, and there's no consistency for beginning, middle, or end. So for example, if you go down to security cameras equipment halfway down, you have absolutely no idea where that begins and ends. And I would love to have printed out what we actually see before you, because then what you could do is to read what the item is, to read the summary of it and look at the number. And that's not possible given what was printed.
That's why we had Amy reformat it this way. It was sent to you late this afternoon or by email.
Oh.
I made that request this morning, so.
Thank you. No, I hadn't read that this afternoon. Well, that's good. Yeah, that would make it much easier in the future.
Yeah. All right, so I'm not hearing any groundswell for or against these particular ones. I do know that there was some discussion relative to the facility improvement at the Performing Arts Center. And maybe you could give us a recap of how the Board of Selectmen looked at that. And I know that this is of interest to Linda and others. Maybe we could just chat about, the decisions made or to include or not to include that particular expenditure.
So Eric Wellman is on. I don't know if him or Maria want to take this one, but they can go through their decision.
Hi, Rob. It's Eric. Was
Hey,
your
Eric.
question about the security cameras item or the life safety
the bathrooms and the actual build out of roughly $300,000 project?
Yeah, I think that the consensus of the Board of Selectmen was to it wasn't a referendum on that particular project, but I think we wanted to consider that project in the context of the larger budget and other capital needs, through the normal budget process rather than through year-end savings. And that was the rationale there.
Okay, maybe Linda, you could speak to how that might have helped anyway. It just so we have it on our record. Or
Well, I did listen to the Board of Selectmen meeting, and 2 people spoke on it, and both indicated that they thought we were going to get a federal grant. So that's why they didn't want to provide any funding through this mechanism. So just to give you a little background about that federal grant, we have not applied. We've been waiting for information. I sent, so I've looked at, it's very, very, very long and complicated grant application with very lengthy information online about the requirements, and that grant is, they're anticipating making only about 150 awards around the nation. on a first come, first served basis, and people have been applying for a couple months now. There are several things about eligibility that make me think we probably won't be eligible, like that it's supposed to be a multi-state or national focus with regions that are most adversely affected by COVID, that it's a project that does regional economic development and enhances employment opportunities, several things like that, that they wanted to, they want to provide 80% of the funding and have 20% matched by the applicant, which in this case is the town, plus the Performing Arts Center. So it's not at all clear that we will qualify for a grant. I'm waiting for Maria to contact her liaison and get answers to these questions before we spend thousands of hours writing grant application when we're not eligible from the get-go. So, I'm disappointed, to say the least. It's a little awkward for me being on both the Board of Finance and the PAC, but I can say we're disappointed to not see any funding come through this, and I would love to see that be reconsidered in some way, because if we do get a grant, if we're lucky enough, and I hope I'm wrong about those eligibility restrictions, we're going to need to match it. And Maria had encouraged us to expand the grant application appropriately to include a bunch of other things aside from what the PAC wants, but to include some town kinds of projects, like they want to replace light poles on the access road and do LED light conversion and such. When you take all of these things together, it's about a $4 million project, which means that 20% is $800,000. So we would certainly expect the PAC to ante up a chunk of that, but can't do it all entirely alone. And that application needs to go in as soon as possible, because it's a first come, first serve process of awards. So the longer we wait, the less chance there is of ever getting an award. So, but if we're going to put in an application, we need to make a commitment to coming up with funding to fund our share. They were quite clear that the more you put up, the more favorably they would look upon your application. If the grant application isn't a possibility, then we still would love to see the town provide some funding. There's been a discussion about transferring the $300,000 that's in the CIP now to instead of using it for a freestanding bathroom, use it for bathrooms that would be publicly accessible within the building that the PAC wants to build. And so this would be a way to fund it now rather than putting it in the CIP later. But enough said from me.
Lisa? Mute.
Okay. Can't hear you.
Mute. There you go.
Okay. First of all, thank you for that information. I did watch the whole meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It was very long, and that was added information that I didn't see presented. But, when it comes to us at the end of year to do spending on end of year savings, I sort of view the Board of Finance's role as, one, can the town afford this? Is it reasonable? Are there less expensive alternatives? And was there adequate transparency and communication? And I'm going to support all these requests, but I think there's an opportunity to perhaps get information out earlier so that people can attend and reach out and ask questions about this stuff. I think the information was published on a Tuesday and considered on a Wednesday. So I think there's an opportunity there. But as to the specific question of the PAC, we wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to get a federal grant because we didn't commit to dollars there. And I understand it's the Board of Selectmen's job to decide whether to actually make a commitment. And we're not going to do that until the Board of Selectmen does that. But if the Board of Selectmen does view this as something they want the PAC to pursue in terms of a grant approval without the actual commitment, one option we would have, but I would like the Board of Selectmen's input on it, is just to assign capital reserves of 300,000 to this potentiality. So it's not an actual appropriation or a transfer, and that wouldn't occur until the Board of Selectmen actually approves the project and makes the recommendation. But it might help the PAC apply for the grants in a way that doesn't impact our finances other than through the designation. And I understand the designation can be done without Board of Selectmen approval. We can just do that. So we could do that at a later time, as if I'm understanding correctly, and I'd ask Amy to verify that, but that would be an option to enable the PAC to make the application if the Board of Selectmen supports the application. Because I just wanted to throw that out there as an option.
Thank you. That sounds like a good option. Let me reiterate, it's an $800,000 match that we have to come up with.
Yeah, Lisa, I'll just add that sounds reasonable to me. Thanks.
So Amy, we can wait until the Board of Selectmen discusses that as a board, and then we can do the assigned balance at a later time if the Board of Selectmen is in agreement with the first.
I think that's a good plan.
Okay.
All right. Appreciate you guys. A little off agenda, but I appreciate Eric, you being here, and Maria as well, and you're hearing us out on that. That's great. Appreciate it. All right. So hearing no real material discussion relative to the rest of these, I would be looking for a motion to move effective October 13th. That's not October 13th. Is it the 13th?
19th today.
19th. I was reading, okay. October 19th to approve the general fund and capital transfers request as presented. So I need someone else to make that motion.
I'll make that.
I'll second it.
All right, so Lisa moved and Linda seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. All right. So this is my agenda. So I think we're down then to approving the minutes. I had a couple minor nits that I will scan and send to who? You, Amy?
Yeah, you can send them to me, but you skipped the tri-board discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, important. Sorry about that. That's because I couldn't find my agenda. It's on my desk here somewhere. So we wanted to just prepare to prepare for the tri-board meeting. And I'll share some thoughts of how I think we should approach this year and get your guys' input. You know, in the past, we've sort of scurried around in October and at our November meeting to come up with a single one number. This is our guidance for budget expense increase. And that makes this meeting Board of Finance dominant, and it's based on assumptions that are way too early, I think, to be accurate. And it has caused some, the discourse to move away from the things that we need to try to, each department, each board needs to focus on that should be in the budget going forward. So I would like to have the Board of Finance come up at our November meeting with those items of the budget that we want to present to the other two boards that we care about. And that would be the pension assumption rate, the levels of ending reserves, a target tax increase. Help me, Lisa. You know, there's a couple of other items that we, that
you had mentioned to me the tax collection assumption, the reserve target, the ARC pension investment assumption, use of health reserves, planned use of capital reserves, and perhaps a discussion about ARPA and whether we'll see that impacting the budget.
And then based on what the information we received today, we should endorse a forecast for assessed, for the grand list that will ask them to make their operating budgets work off of going forward. And then we'll ask them to do the same for us. You know, what program initiatives do you have? What assumptions do you have relative to new personnel programs? Things like that. And you know, the capital and debt service is always going to be the hard part here. But I know the Board of Ed is already thinking about their next project on top of the Latimer Lane project. And this is why I was so insistent on trying to think about the grand list growth going out. But we want to have those discussions, at least initially, at the tri-board meeting, which is in December after our November meeting. So our homework assignment for the November meeting will be to try to get a position, and I'll work with Amy to give you some items in advance of that meeting to think about, so that we can come for a party discussion about that. But I want the actual tri-board meeting to have presentations by each of the three boards on a more cooperative basis, meaning this is what we're trying to accomplish with the next budget from the Board of Ed perspective. It's from the town perspective. And then, you know, rather than have each board use the mill rate or the adjustment to try to justify just the tax increase, I want to try to get back to building a combined budget that addresses those needs, and then coming back to what that impact is on the tax rate, so that it's a more iterative process, which is in fact actually the way we've actually done it over all the years. It starts with a knee-jerk, not knee-jerk, that's pejorative, that we give a expense cap, recoil, impossible, never going to happen, can't do it. You know, we have a 3% increase in our contractual salaries, and then we work towards the middle with some give and take. And we'll do that again. But I think we should start with each department board presenting their priorities for the budget process, and then we'll work with that. Does this sound like kumbaya, sort of wishful thinking? But
no, I can, just a process question. I think you've already said this, but we'll have the goal, I think you had said, was to have an open discussion and leave time to hear from people, and hope that members of the other boards will weigh in, and that hopefully, I think we do listen, but hopefully we'll also give the impression of listening. I think sometimes we can be.
Well, I'd like them to go first. I think we've always gone first, and then it's, it's not, that's not the mood and attitude. I think we want to flip this around.
Perfect.
We'll say, well, you can do all of those things as long as you take care of these things for us. 6.5% pension rate assumption. Is that where we're headed? Where are we now? I can't even remember.
Amy, what are we targeted for this year?
Yeah.
I think you guys wanted to go down to the 6.5 this year.
Yeah. Yeah. And then well, after that, we'll come back and say, well, so doing what you want to do, doing what you want to do, and doing what we need to do, that's a 15% increase in the mill rate and a 55 mill rate. I don't think that'll fly.
Well, but I think you're right. To the point is we'll take a look at everyone's needs, then look at best practices and current policies. Are we going to follow them or abandon them? And then affordability. But they're all part of the same conversation. You can't look at one independently. So we can have that conversation.
And we were told today we're going to have better numbers on the near-term grand list in January, right? So that's after our tri-board meeting. It's this will evolve over time. All right. So Lisa, Amy, and I have some work to do to get something out for you guys to think about in advance of that meeting. When is that meeting? In November? Oh, it's at the bottom of the agenda, if I can find it.
November 16th.
Thank you. Okay. All right. If anybody else has any changes to the minutes, let's send them to Amy. Otherwise, they were generally in very good shape. All right. I think that's it. Kevin, one more time.
I'm making a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
everybody.